Barrett Sallee, welcome back into the game at Tuscaloosa. I hope you're doing well, man.
I'm doing great, Ryan. How are you?
I'm good. Just spending a lot of time looking at Brian Daboll, and let me make you a part of the conversation that we're having here today. What grade would you give him on play calling this year? Maybe just all the things with an offensive coordinator.
Great overall for play calling, or as an offensive coordinator, I'd say probably a B-. He didn't do anything to screw anything up. I don't know if he did anything to expand upon much either. There have been a few exceptions. I think in the final month and a half of the season, you saw a few tiny different wrinkles. But the fact that you didn't develop a wide receiver outside of Calvin Ridley, the fact that good defenses saw, diagnosed, and took away the running game enough to, threaten Alabama in November. Those are things that really should not happen because of what you had coming back as a team, and because of the fact that you knew what Jalen Hurts' baseline was. And Jalen's been fine this year, and I think he gets criticized probably a little too much because he's just running the plays that are called, and he's making the right decisions. Yeah, is the offense limited in part because of him? Yeah, but the offensive line, I think, is probably a bigger concern and a bigger reason why Alabama's been limited on top of what Brian Daboll is, his play calling prowess or lack thereof. So, I think it's a B-. He didn't do anything to screw it up, and to that, I think he deserves credit because, I think the biggest challenge for coordinators is knowing what not to do, and he clearly knows what not to do, but I think the top end of Alabama's offense is still kind of where it was all offseason, and that's not really where it needs to be at this point.
It's a great point. But, the one comment that I continue to talk with you and many others that call into the program or the guests that we feature here, going into game number 13, college football playoffs, Alabama lacks an identity.
Well, I don't know if they lack an identity. I think their identity is the same, and it's beatable, and that's the problem. You can say it doesn't have an identity. I just think it's a limited identity. Like, the identity is one that a good defense like Auburn in the Iron Bowl and even Mississippi State, flat out said, okay, we're gonna do our best to stop you, and we're gonna make you do something other than Damian Harris, Bo Scarborough, and make you beat us. And Mississippi State almost did, and Auburn did. So the identity is just sort of what it is, and it's just to me, it clearly is not good enough to win the SEC West. We saw that. To me, I don't think it's good enough to win the playoff either, because when you go up against a team like Clemson and potentially a team like either Oklahoma or Georgia for different reasons, you need to be dynamic offensively. And Georgia and Clemson defensively can do essentially what Auburn did. Oklahoma can't, but it also might score 40 points. I'm not saying it will, but it has the ability to do that, in which case your identity better be pretty darn solid. So it's an interesting time in Tuscaloosa because, like I told you this before, and I know Alabama fans don't like to hear it, I think there's three really championship-worthy teams based on resume and based on what they did all year, and the fourth team in the playoffs that we have to have now happens to be Alabama.
Going into this game with Alabama and Clemson, I know we're a couple of weeks away, but we continue to pick your brain about it. Where do you think Alabama needs to excel to have a chance to win?
Their offensive line needs to be significantly better than it was in November. Because, and really, I know folks have said, well, Ross Pierce-Baker's coming back and he's going to help, and that's true, he's going to help, but it just, their offensive line wasn't that good this year. I think you look back and Jalen, when he's in obvious passing situations, is susceptible. Now, to his credit, he does stand tall in the pocket at times in clutch situations, specifically Mississippi State, and deliver the ball on time. And he also makes plays with his legs. But you're going up against Clemson. Like, this is the best defensive front in the country, and so their offensive line's got to be significantly better because if it's not, I just don't know how Jalen's gonna not necessarily survive, but how he's gonna withstand that type of pressure and how the offense is going to sustain drives. And that's the biggest thing is you look at how games got sideways for Alabama. A lot of them were big running plays, whether that be from Jalen or Damian Harris, that turned games sideways. Clemson I don't think they're susceptible for that defensively. But if Alabama blocks better, maybe those holes do open up. So I think it's all on the offensive line for the Crimson Tide.
Would you agree that Alabama maybe needs to take an approach that Clemson did? And I know Deshaun Watson and Jalen Hurts is no Deshaun Watson. I get that. But maybe taking that same approach, hey, we know they're elite on the defensive side of the football. Let's wear them out. If they'll defend 99 plays, then maybe we could take advantage of the fourth quarter.
Yeah, they may need to. The problem is what happens if it doesn't work. Like what happens if you go 3 and out and you don't possess the ball? Then you turn into essentially what happened against Mississippi State, where Alabama didn't possess the ball for like the first 45 minutes of the game. Seems so. Yeah, it's definitely an idea and definitely something I think they need to consider. But that's a high risk, high reward situation because you better hope that tempo comes through. You better hope that it works. Otherwise, you're putting your defense in a really tough spot, having to be on the field after going 3 and out consistently. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a possibility. The problem is, will it actually work? Because the one thing about Clemson, which I think is different this year than in years past, is they not only have a great front seven, I'd say they're way deeper on the defensive line in terms of pure NFL-ready talent right now than Alabama is. So, you may be able to wear the first 4 guys out, but they've got another 4 guys coming right back after them that are really solid too.
Yeah, we're spending a lot of time right now with Barrett Sallee, talking right now, national college football analyst, CBSSports.com. Barrett does a lot of different things, wears a lot of different hats. He's also part of Sirius XM or ESPNU now on Sirius XM. SEC Smothered and Covered. Best way to connect with Barrett is Barrett Sallee on the Twitter account. Barrett, let me go into the other conversation that Nick Saban brought to the forefront about going after the early signing period and saying it's just a mess and sounds irritated and frustrated. What was your take for maybe some of those comments?
That he's absolutely right. It's a giant mess, and I've said it from the beginning. It makes no sense to have it right now. For the playoff teams, and Nick Saban obviously is in this boat, you're juggling way too many things, and it's just impossible to wear that many hats. No matter how big your support staff is, no matter how great you are multitasking, it just doesn't make sense. You're going to have even more assistant coaches fired or deciding to leave on Friday or whenever I guess that's Friday afternoon. I think it's 3 p.m. is when the period ends. It's just like the after National Signing Day in February. You have that Thursday, rush of assistant coaching moves. That's completely disingenuous. I hate that coaches do that. I understand why they do it, but it's not fair to the kids. And that's the thing is Greg McElroy and I talked about this, and I think he mentioned it on his show today too. He probably would have signed with Texas Tech right now because Mike Leach would have probably told him if they had an early signing period back in his day, sign now or your offer is rescinded. So the kids are put in real precarious situations. And the overwhelming thing is this. Why did we talk about having an early signing period to begin with? The reason was you wanted the kids who were legacies. You wanted the kids who wanted to get it out of their way before their senior year of high school and take pressure off. You wanted them to sign. Well, that's not what this is. This is now National Signing Day. Like this is the bigger one, it seems, like the way it's going right now. And to have it right after a football season when some kids are taking finals, some kids have just wrapped up their season, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make any sense at all. I think you should do away with it completely or move it up to August 1st, because then you actually will get the guys who are legacy guys who are going to go to Alabama or Georgia or Auburn or Florida, no matter what. They can get out of their way, play their senior year of high school, and the other 90% of kids can sign in February. Or do what some other people that have, I think Andy Staples is one that has championed this for a long time, just do away with National Signing Day altogether. Just let kids sign whenever they want. Put a letter of intent in front of them after their junior season and say, all right, sign it. And if a coach says, all right, you have to sign it, by May 30th of your senior year or January 1st or whatever, let the schools do that. That would eliminate a lot of problems to me.
It would, but I mean Barrett, that's too logical for college football, isn't it?
It's true. It's way too logical for college football.
Hey, Barrett, what else grabs your attention outside of Georgia and Oklahoma and Alabama and Clemson in the SEC?
LSU Notre Dame's really interesting to me because, you saw this firsthand. LSU's defense actually got significantly better especially the last month of the season. But they were really good against Alabama. They were really good, down the stretch. And to have a month to prepare with a really young defense, I think it's going to help them a lot. And then on the other side of the ball for them, they're going to, I would imagine, treat the Citrus Bowl against Notre Dame a lot like Notre Dame treated the Music City Bowl against LSU in 2014 when Malik Zaire got a lot of snaps when they knew Everett Golson was moving on. Because LSU's defense, I think we all think now, can be really solid next year. They still got to find a quarterback. So how much does Miles Brennan come into play? How many snaps does he get in meaningful situations? How does that rotation work? Because, like in the Alabama game, they put Miles Brennan in the fourth quarter down 2 scores with 5 minutes to play in a meaningful situation against Alabama. So they clearly have trust in him. So how they mix in snaps for him is interesting because they've got to get him ready. They can't go into next year without a quarterback. Otherwise, it's just I wouldn't say it's going to be more of the same, but there's no reason not to at this point.
Barrett, I want to go back to Alabama Clemson here because we talked about whether the criticism is fair or unfair against Jalen here for a minute. What if Alabama loses this Clemson game? Could you imagine the meltdown it's going to be? I mean, because if they're already targeting him now, where will it be after the Clemson loss if Alabama loses that game?
It'll be on Daboll, I think. I mean, I don't. Jalen will get some, but I mean, people that want Tua. People that respect Jalen and like Jalen are probably not going to change because his record speaks for itself, even if they lose to Clemson. I think it'll go to Daboll because we've talked about this for more than a year now. The off-season goal for Alabama has been on the table for a full year, and if it hasn't changed, it hasn't changed. 1 year with Jalen Hurts as a true freshman to be conservative, like Lane Kiffin kind of was all year last year, is totally understandable and perhaps even desirable. But to not really expand on that offense and in some areas even regress because you don't have a complement to Calvin Ridley, your offensive line wasn't as good, your stars on the offensive line weren't as good, that to me falls on Daboll. So I don't think it would fall on Jalen. I think people have made up their mind. If they think Tua is the greatest because of his high school tape or he's the backup quarterback and the backup quarterback's always the most popular person on campus, fine. If they like Jalen, that's probably not going to change because his record is what it is. But I think it's going to fall on the offensive staff, specifically Brian Daboll, if they lose.